Hello, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the day. Hope you had an amazing weekend. Once again, thank you for all the likes and the loves. I really appreciate that. It's good to hear that you guys are benefiting from this information. I noticed that some people are actually sharing it too, and that's fantastic. If you think that this could help other people as well, then by all means, please share it. So, today we're going to talk about knee problems and how to get out of them. Knee problems happen a variety of different ways, but I think the information that I give you should help. A pretty high percentage of people out there. There might be some people out there where this information may not apply to their situation, or they may not think it applies to their situation. But knee problems are a pain in the butt, can lead to a lot of other problems. And if I give you some insight about how they happen and how I got out of my knee problems, I think that'll empower you to make accurate choices as far as your treatments go, to lead you to the destination you're hoping. Well, anyways, here's my knee problem story. Let me tell you about the symptoms I had with my knees. So one really strong characteristic of my knee problems was chronic swelling. My knee joints were always swollen. You could kind of press on a little bit, you'd feel some fluid in there. That fluid also limited the range of motion I had. So if I was to bend my knee to a certain degree, I would all of a sudden feel tremendous pressure in that joint. And so things like going up and down stairs was, uncomfortable on my knees. I could feel that, because I had to bend at a certain range. Um, It took me a while to get out of my knee problems. And at first, it took me a while to get into my knee problem, and then it took a while to get out of my knee problems. The chronic swelling thing kind of happened over time. And I would like to say that it was one thing that really fixed my knee problems, but it was kind of a two-parter here to fix the knees. The first part was to get rid of all the tension in the knee so that the knee would move the right way and have better range of motion. And then the second part was to retrain the way I moved, which we call it kinesiology, right? Where I had to adjust my kinesiology to support my joint in the way it needs to so it doesn't get swollen and the tracking is off and things like that. So one thing that can happen when you get a lot of tension in your body, like I had mentioned earlier, is that that tension in your connective tissue builds up to the point where it eventually kind of pulls the joints out of alignment a little bit, right? Well, in my situation, the knee was slightly off, okay? And it was very slight. If you were to look at my knee, you wouldn't think anything wrong with it. But when you moved my knee, you could feel it. Like not somebody else moving it, but when I moved it myself, right? I'm feeling the insides, right? Because I'm living with it. So it wasn't something that was like really obvious, uh, but you is more of an experiential thing on the person that has the problem. So the thing is when your knee joint's out like this, every time you move it, because the tracking is off, the knee's not stacked right, you agitate the joint, and that agitation uh, makes the body do different things. Well, one of the things it can do is put a lot of fluid in there, like the water. It does to kind of reduce some. I'm guessing it does it to reduce some of the friction going on there to give you a little bit more lubrication down there. Uh, it probably does it too to limit your range of motion too, because if you were to bend it more, you might actually cause a little bit more damage in that situation. So it might be kind of capping your movements in a certain way to kind of prevent you from creating further damage, that kind of thing. So the first thing I did, and this is probably like the trickiest one right here, and you will need to do this even without the other component of this. At some point, you will need to do this one for sure. The bones in my feet were so locked up that it was messing with my knee movements. And I didn't realize that. It took me a long time to figure that one out. Because what I was doing prior to that is pretty much what almost every other massage therapist does to fix knees, and that is work the IT bands and the quads and maybe the hamstring, something like that. But usually they focus on the IT bands. And so I was figuring that was my problem because when I was younger, I had something called iliotibial band syndrome. Basically, the tracking in my hips was off, and it inflamed the joints, and then it created this cascade of effects, and eventually led to an injury of sorts. And it all had to deal with this IT band. At least that's what they told me at the doctor's office. I had something called iliotibial band syndrome, and they had me doing physical therapy. I was on crutches for a while and all that stuff. That was about when I was 16, okay? Well, I recovered from that, obviously, and here I am now. So the knee problem never probably changed from that point of being 16, okay? And it just progressively got worse over time. It took a long time to get to the point where, it was really noticeable. Like I couldn't really move my knees so much, without feeling pressure in them and things like that. And I probably would have never have thought to work on my feet, actually. The reason why I worked on my feet is because I started to develop something called plantar fasciitis. And if you've ever had it, you know that it's really uncomfortable. It can feel like your foot is on fire. Needles in your foot, just like it's on fire. It might even be completely numb, like very little sensitivity in your foot. It can come off a lot of different ways. And that's because this is how plantar fasciitis is. So if this is your foot, the plantar side of your foot is the bottom of your foot, right? Fascia refers to that connective tissue down here, and the muscles too, to some extent. And itis is inflammation. So what happens is that connective tissue gets inflamed a little bit, starts to expand. And as it's expanding, it puts pressure on these nerves in here. And that's why you get that continuous ache, and it doesn't take much pressure before you, like standing on your foot, for instance, it doesn't take much pressure before you feel that burn or the pins and needles in your foot and that kind of thing. And so I had that. That was what really got my attention and really made me, I wasn't really looking to fix my knees at this point. I just wanted to fix my feet. But in that process, it fixed my knees also. And this is what I learned. My feet were locked up, okay? I was wearing these shoes called Pumas, and they were squeezing, it's a certain kind of Puma, squeezing my foot like this. It basically clamped the joints down, and they'd be in my feet would be in these shoes for very long periods of time. And over time, the connective tissue just kind of bound these joints together. It's actually more like these joints. They're called tarsal joints in your feet, right? But it bound these joints together, so they weren't really articulating. And that's very important. They need to articulate. And the feet are interesting in a sense that you only have, I think it's 27 bones in your feet, but you might have more than 30 actual joints in your foot. And so you might be asking yourself, well, how can that be? Well, some of these bones, like the bones like towards your ankle, this is not my ankle, right? We know that. But you have these little peg bones here, close to your ankle. The hand is in structure is very similar to the foot, actually. Well, these peg bones might have a joint interacting with it on all four sides, okay? And it needs to happen. If that articulation is not happening, it can create all sorts of movement dysfunctions as it progresses. Another thing, too, is this articulation is very important because that is actually sending a message to the brain as far as what's going on down by the foot. And based off that information, your brain will send out motor commands, okay? And this is to make the muscles fire in certain coordinated patterns to keep the joints in a nice place, to keep you from tipping over, keep you in balance, lots of different things, right? But if the brain isn't getting the whole message or the right message, the muscle firing pattern that it sends out isn't so accurate. It might be off a little bit here and there. It turns out that this articulation, the more movement you can get in that foot, and especially subtle movements like the subtle details there, that information makes it to the brain too. And that is really important because when that muscle firing pattern comes out, there's these certain details that need to happen to support the joint. And if they're not there, it can cause these problems. It's a slow process, but it does happen. Let me give you an analogy. It's like looking through the window. The message going to if the joints aren't moving right, that message going up to the brain's like looking at a picture through a foggy window. Okay, it's kind of like that. You can kind of make out what's going on, can see what's going on. But as far as those fine details are concerned, it's not picking them up. that's kind of what happens down there. And you're going to need to have a certain level of detail to see that, to get proper joint movement proper joint movement to support that entire structure down there. And so what happened to me was it got locked up. The messages were foggy. The motor messages coming out were foggy, created these dysfunctional patterns that eventually kind of interwoven themselves in my body in different ways. But once I started getting that mobility back in the foot, started to restore those joints, a couple of things happened. I'll tell you the process as I got out. First thing that happened was my plantar fasciitis started to disappear. And it was more like, sometimes these things disappear like that. Sometimes they fade out. Sometimes it takes a while and they fade out to the point where you almost forget you had the problem. That happens quite often, believe it or not, if you're going the right way. So first, my plantar fasciitis started to disappear, okay? Started to fade out. As it was disappearing, I could feel different pieces of my lower leg muscles working. Because the muscles in the lower leg, a lot of those control the action of the foot. Now, one other thing that was happening that I didn't realize it was contributing to my knee problem was the lack of ankle flexibility I had, okay? And I didn't really realize like how important that was until I got it back. Does that make sense? Because your thigh has to be at certain angles when you're jumping or doing stuff. It has to be at certain angles so that you don't get that pressure in the knee. You're actually using the thigh muscles to move around. But in order to get down that low the right way, you have to have flexibility in your ankle and so on. That's what I was missing, and that's why I couldn't get into it the right way. So once I started getting these things back, all these memories started to come back too of like how I used to move, because I grew up doing martial arts for many years. Still do it to some extent, but used to do it a lot more back then. So I started remembering those things, like how I moved and stuff like that. Started to come back into focus. And then, so one other thing that was happening that I forgot to mention is that my lower leg muscles were atrophying. They were shrinking, okay? And that kind of scared me a bit. But once I got the mobility back in my foot, I could feel these little intricate muscles working in my lower leg again. And these things weren't working before. These would be like the fine details that my brain should be making happen, right? But it's not, because it's not getting the whole picture. But now that it is, it's making better movements, better coordinated firing patterns, things like that. And so once that started to happen, I was feeling these muscles in my lower leg start to work again. Then the muscles started to come back to life. Started to fill up with chi, I guess, if you want to call it that, right? Started to come back to life. And I realized something at this point, because prior to that, I was at the gym all the time, doing those calf muscle lifts and things like that, trying to get my lower legs back, and it just wasn't working. It just wasn't going anywhere. As a matter of fact, it never went anywhere until I got the range of motion back in those foot joints, until I started articulating the right way. And it made me realize that you could probably work out all day long, but if you're not doing it the right way, you're probably not going to develop the right way. So that was a big eye-opener for me. Okay, so after some time, I got my foot back. My foot's not burning anymore. My knees are feeling better. They're actually starting to feel quite a bit better, really. And I think I'm on the right track. And then one day, I think I was carrying something, and then I heard my knee kind of click like that. And that was actually the moment when my knee went back into place. But it probably took about maybe like 4 or 5 months before I got to that stage, okay? And I knew it was better. At first it scared me, but I knew it was better because my range of motion improved dramatically. You know how kids can kind of sit with their legs out like that when they're younger, they're watching TV or playing video games? And then over time, people tend to lose that, right? And you are told from, the medical industry out there that, oh yeah, that's normal. You'll never get that back. It's just how it is. Well, I have it. I got it back. I had completely lost it, and I have it back. I can do it. So that's the truth right there. Let's see. So that's how I got out of it. I use this thing called a Max Massager. It's a Brookstone device. It's like a thumper tool. I tried many things. I tried cupping, and cupping is awesome. Cupping is absolutely amazing. You don't keep something around for more than 6,000 years because it doesn't work. Cupping's been around for much longer than that. It's very awesome. It's pretty much in every culture around the country has, or around the world, has found cupping in one way, shape, or form. So it's not just me. It's lots of people throughout time and history have found the same things as well. So I tried that, and it did help. It didn't get me all the way out, but the thing that did was this Max Massager device. Okay, that's what really got the mobility back in the foot. But then I needed to retrain my kinesiology to support the openness of my foot, because if I didn't do that, it would just eventually go back into that same position. And it does. It does take time, but now I only have to work on my feet like maybe once every 6 months, or maybe even once a year. I might be able to get away with doing it once a year now, right? That's the I think if you can get into a position where you have to do these things less often, you're probably going the right direction, right? Because it'd be great if you can just keep it nice and open through proper movement. That would be the ultimate goal. So to correct the kinesiology part of it, I had to go into the world of yoga to do that. But not just any yoga, okay? Yoga's great. Doesn't matter what kind of yoga you're doing. I think it's going to be good for you. I think it's a great choice, something good to add to your life. You almost can't go wrong. Yeah, picking up a yoga practice, really. And I've done lots of different types of yogas, many different types of yogas. I've been doing yoga for more than 20 years now. I just thought about that. I think it's been about 22 years, actually. Anyways, the particular yoga that I did that I believe fixed my knee problems came from something called the Bikram series, or the 26 and 2 series. What it is, it's a set of 26 postures done in a specific order, a specific way, with 2 breathing exercises. And it's typically done in the heat, usually like 105 degrees. And that's the yoga. I found that one about a little bit more than a decade ago, and that's the one I'm pretty much just stuck with mainly. And I chose to do that one because I had seen so many miracles come from people that did that yoga. Anyways, in this series of yoga, there are different sections to work on different areas of your body. There is a spine strengthening series. It consists of 4 postures. There's also one for your knees and legs as well. It's called the awkward series. It's a set of 3 postures, okay? The first one is you sit down as if you're sitting on a chair. The second one is you come up as high as you can on your toes, and then you sit down, but you stay on the tops of your toes as you do it. And then the third one is you come up a little bit off your heels, you press your knees together and sit down. I'm not going to demonstrate it for you. You can go on YouTube and see these demonstrations if you're really curious. Just kind of want to get to the point here. I'm giving you the information. You can go and get all the details on your own. So it was those 3 postures that I used to recalibrate the muscle firing patterns and to get the proper kinesiology back in these. And it didn't take very long of doing that 26 and 2 yoga series to help with my knee issues. And so between those 2 things, taking out the adhesions in my foot and getting them to articulate better, and then doing these, which would be kind of like PT, physical therapy exercises, doing those 3 postures, I was able to get my knees back. And they're doing really well to this day. I hardly have to work on them these days. And I pretty much use the same things to treat other people with the same condition. The only thing that's tricky is the yoga part, because you can suggest it to somebody, you can't make them do it, right? It's when you're pursuing health, you can get help from other people, but there's going to be sections of it where you have to be proactive yourself. It might require you to do some of that work. So that's my story about knees and knee problems and how to get out of them. There are a little more details in there, but I think with the information that I've given you today, it should put together a much bigger picture of how this happens and how to get out of it, and put you on the path, a good path, coming out of your knee and plantar fasciitis problems if you have them. Well, thanks again, everybody, for hanging out with me this fine afternoon. And again, I appreciate all your comments. I appreciate all the love, and I'll keep these coming as much as I can. Have a wonderful day, and I hope to hear from you soon.